There we go. So, first off, let's hit. Yeah, it says recording a process. We're good. We're good. So the first question we're gonna hit is one of the required questions that was talking about after planning, teaching, and reflecting on our micro, how did we approach as interdisciplinary with a partner and like we had a little bit of a discussion before we went and recorded this, and I think overall we came to the idea that instead of picking just any random topic from both our sections and try to mash it together, like me pick a topic and you make them write about it, we picked one where they could write a speech and I picked one where they could write a speech. We picked it two topics that were like as cohesive as possible. I didn't know, do you have anything you wanted to add on that?
I think, I think you pretty much hit it. Like we had like a subject or an activity that literally had English factors and ag factors already. Like it wasn't a big thing, but it had like that
Yeah.
element of English already in it. So I think the lesson itself, the activity itself was already kind of a perfect crossover for
Yeah.
our content areas. So I don't think we necessarily had to like change anything about our content or like alter it. But I think if that makes sense, but I think it was already pretty much kind of set for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the next required question was, did we design with equity in mind? How did we design? I just read that twice. What happened that showed that our design was working or not? And I think our lesson plan, we planned our lesson plan a little more better than we executed our actual lesson, and we specifically designed it so that students who were scared of public speaking could have the opportunity to do it with their friends and people they could associate with. Or we originally planned to have an option where they didn't have to public speak at all. They didn't have to do an actual speech, where they would have the opportunity to do the poster.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, kind of on top of that, just how we planned it. We did know our class. We did plan for our students specifically, in terms of the way we had kind of designed the groups. Like we had one person, at least one person in every group who kind of had prior knowledge specifically to that FFA competition. And so,
Mhm.
like with our students in mind, we designed kind of the lessons so that everybody had somebody in their team, somebody in their group that they could rely on for a certain kind of help, like with the
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah. So the next part we were going to hit on was the theory of practice. And there was a couple little topics down there that we could kind of look at. The one that we kind of made a connection to is UDL. Where was it? UDL was something that we did utilize, I think, pretty effectively in our lesson. We made sure that we would verbally tell them like the instructions and what for the duration of the we verbally told them as a class, and then for the duration of the group work we had it up on our PowerPoint, but then also after during the group work we were going around, and that way we could one-on-one kind of um give them more information that way. Was there something you wanted to add about UDL? I didn't hit on the poster option for UDL.
Yeah, I think in terms of the design, I think we did have multiple modes of expression. Unfortunately, we just didn't quite get that into the actual execution of the lesson, but it was in our lesson plan that they could, express their knowledge in a variety of ways. And I think having multiple modes of expression was definitely the UDL aspect because the
Oh,
form of assessment was essentially in writing. We had, oh no, did I cut out?
just a
Boy.
little bit. We got you back pretty quick, so. Oh, maybe. You're gone again.
We did have okay. We did have that every group would write down their argument or their claim and everything about that. So we had that solid form of assessment, but we did plan to have multiple modes of presenting that to the class.
Yeah. Then going on to the next category was talking about examining our planning process and how like it translated into our lesson itself. And part of this is talking one of the one of the questions was, got something in my throat. What was your learning activity effectively planned? And was it effectively planned? And through discussion, we decided that it was pretty effectively planned. While some other groups actually did like a physical run through where they either met up on Zoom or met up in person and ran through it. But me and Keely just had really good conversations, and we were able to really get in there and
I think we communicated
words.
well.
We were really able to get in there and communicate, and without any actual physical run throughs of both of us together, I think it went smoother than it. I don't think that we missed out on anything by not meeting up to do an actual run through. I think it was just so effectively planned. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think in our like I think we did work I think we worked great together in terms of designing our
Mhm.
lesson especially. And we were both kind of we were on the same page pretty much through it all, like in terms of what we wanted to do, how we wanted to do it, and everything like that. I think it was probably just in the execution where like the transitions, but we'll
Mhm.
talk more about that in a bit.
Yeah, so the next one was talking, telling us to like take a look at our teaching process and our assessment. Um, there was a couple different things under this, like what did we do well and what did we need more practice on, and we'll kind of hit that when we go down to presence, our classroom presence. But for this section, we specifically discussed how we accessed students' prior knowledge and how we think we did like a very good job at that. um, so when it came to the ag part, to access students' prior knowledge, I specifically picked topics for our for each group that have been headlines in the news before. They're something like very popular, they're misconception heavy, and pretty much everyone should know. Everyone should have like an idea about these topics, and that was kind of me reaching to their prior knowledge, and then providing each group with a expert, putting an ag ed student in each group who had a little bit more background was able to help them further their prior knowledge. And then Keely also had some good prior knowledge work too.
Yeah, I think as far as prior knowledge English side of it, in the lesson as I was kind of starting
Oh, you're gone for a
to
second.
talk. Oh no.
We got you
Am I
now.
good now?
Yep.
Sweet. um Yeah, I think like as we are starting to talk about as I was starting to talk about pathos in the lecture part of it, I did kind of mention like as we've talked about the rhetorical triangle in the last couple of days or last couple of weeks, so ethos, logos, and pathos. Like I kind of made that reference as if this were a lesson within a unit, and maybe we've been on the unit for a while. And I know Jim took note of that, and then I know like I did my micro one very heavily focused on the rhetorical triangle. So, half the students in the class kind of had that prior knowledge. And then, as I was going around, it was kind of if they had questions, like referring back to my micro one, I was able to answer those questions. And yeah.
Yeah, and there was actually a second question under this category that we also touched on in our discussion before this, and it was how well did students learn during our lesson? And I think we both witnessed like some true learning. I talked specifically with the group who was they had their topic that was, should almond milk be allowed to be called almond milk? And I went up to the group, and most of the group had no clue that that was even an issue. They're like, well, I mean, I know it doesn't come from a cow, but it's milk. And I was able to work with the ag ed student in that group, and we were able to explain like that is a common misconception that it is milk. It's not milk. It doesn't have the same nutrients. You can't effectively replace dairy with liquid from almonds. Um, and I got to witness the students in that group specifically get rid of their misconceptions of that topic. So I think that part was really good, and I think yeah.
Yeah. I remember I had a few conversations with a few people. I was also talking with the Cures group, but I feel like I'm going to talk about just my conversation with Zook. When it was towards the end when they were writing their exit tickets. And I know at first they weren't their or Zook's group. I don't remember who all else was in that group. Names are not coming to mind. But they were
We
talking
had
about
Sandra
just kind of
Morgan's.
like how they use yeah. They were talking about like kind of how they use pathos, and Zook and I started talking, and I was like, no, when you were using that personal anecdote, like that was pathos, and they were like, wait, okay, cool, and so it was just kind of cool to see things kind of connecting, like things being put together, and I was like, no, you really did, and
Oh, lost it for a second.
I remember having a conversation with the Cures
There we
group
go.
too, and just saying kind of like some of the. It was cool to say and or cool to see them realize that they were maybe using pathos in their argument
Mhm.
without even realizing it. I'm like, no, all these little things that you're doing with like whether you know it or not, like you really are connecting with your audience in a certain way. So like, yeah, it was just kind of really cool to see things connect for people.
Yeah. Our next section, the next category is examining our classroom presence. And I think our classroom presence was very good. I think we were both super comfortable. Yeah, there was a little bit of nervousness, but of course, it's a graded thing. You're in front of your peers. You're going to be nervous first few times that you're going to teach,
Yeah.
but I feel like we were still extremely comfortable for our level of nerves that we had, and I think it also helped that we worked together really well. It seemed like.
Mhm.
Um, let's see what um and we both ended up being able to be highly engaged with the students during the group work when it came to that. I think there was not a time where we were just standing there looking at a group. Anytime we walked up to a group, we were able to like engage in a conversation, help them with something they didn't realize they needed help with, that type of thing. Was there anything else that you wanted to hit on for that section?
I think you pretty much hit it head on. I think we were comfortable in front of everybody. I know I had a bit of nerves at the beginning, kind of like we were talking about in the discussion, but as we went on, I was much more comfortable. And I think as the classroom scenarios came up, um, I know I had a few to deal with, and I don't think some of them were planned, like I was saying, but
Mhm.
I think you and I both handled them in a way that we were comfortable, we were confident in handling them, and I think we handled them in a way that didn't really take away from the lesson itself.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a distraction for the class. And so I think you and I, like you said, we got comfortable. Like, I mean, there was a few points where I would just sit down at the tables with some of the groups, I think, and be like, so what's going on? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Mhm.
what's the conversation like now? Um, and so I think you and I are both really comfortable and confident in answering questions and facilitating a discussion and even just kind of kind of sitting back and letting them take the reins, it being a student centered activity. And so
Yeah.
um,
So looking on to the last section, it's talking about just having us look at our lesson overall. What was our impression of it, just kind of what we did well, what we wish we would have done, that type of thing. And I feel like we had a few things to say about this part specifically. Overall, we think our lesson went very well. We think we did exactly what we intended to. Um, and there isn't really a whole lot we change except for like two things. One thing is we did not anticipate the need for a call and response or a better way, more effective way to get students' attention. Nope, stop. Um, so I think it was like the second to last time that we had to call everyone's attention was a little bit of a struggle, and came up and you said told us to use a call and response, and we figured it probably wasn't quite worth it to create a call and response because that was our last time that we would need to get their attentions that was coming up. Um, that was pretty much that. We also talked if we could reteach it, we would hit we would go follow our lesson plan to a T because we definitely did a little wandering there and we completely forgot to mention anything about the poster alternative except for the fact that it was on the last slide. Yeah, it was listed up there, but we just it left our minds, and if we could redo this lesson, that would be probably the biggest thing. Our biggest mistake, our biggest regret of this. Was there stuff you wanted to hit on? I know we were saying something about the the scenarios that we had going on in the classroom.
I think I'm trying to remember. I think I was gonna kind of just kind of go off of what you were saying. I think like again, I think in terms of our lesson, I think we planned it very well. I think like the lesson plan itself, like I think we did quite well. I think we put it together well, and like I think it was just the execution that we kind of slipped up on, and that was the
Mhm.
transition. And I think we didn't really have. I think because like the micros that we watched up until that point, I don't know if there was like a really solid transition that people were using. Like I didn't really see anybody else using a call and response or like a certain way. I think it was just kind of I think ours was probably it felt like one of the first micros where there was more rowdiness a little bit in that sense. I
Mhm.
know Mackenzie also though had that too. Um,
Yeah.
for sure. But I think like we didn't really think of, I think the issues, the hiccups I think that we experienced were in the execution part of it rather than the lesson plan of it. And so I think if we were to go back and reteach it, it would be and like what I would kind of redo is more so our actual execution. Because if we had fallen like or like you said, if we had followed our lesson plan to a T, I think that would have been a little
Mhm.
bit different. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I still think our execution was great, but our execution compared to our lesson plan,
Yeah.
that's where things kind of fell through a little bit. And normally, if our lesson were to stray away from our lesson plan, that wouldn't be that big of a deal. But the part that we strayed away from is one of our UDL components, which is kind of a important part on our lesson plan. So,
Yeah.
but really,
Agree.
what we're getting to kind of to wrap this up is the idea that we think that our lesson went very good. There are a couple minor things that we would change, but those changes are only needed to be made in the physical giving of the lesson. We think that our lesson plan was really effective, really good. And if we would have followed that, I don't think we would have had any complaints about our lesson itself. So I think, decided that there was no revisions that we could think of that were needed. The only revisions were not in the lesson plan, but in the execution itself. Was there anything else you wanted to say to wrap this up? I think we're right around 15.
Alrighty, I think you pretty much said it. Yeah, I think I kind of already said it was mostly all, I mean, I said kind of my piece, I think, with it being in
Mhm.
the execution. So I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there.
Okay, so yeah, I think that was it. It was a good experience learning how to kind of co-teach, and it was really nice that we were able to work together
Mhm.
so well for this lesson, and I
Yeah,
think it was really beneficial. Um, and I think that's it. So good to
awesome.
go.
Sweet.
All right, so I will end this. Stop.